The lottery ticket had said, Diplomatic Transit Pass, 1 journey, Outer Rim. Sector. Nora Wade had assumed it meant a sightseeing trip. She had packed, sensibly, 2 changes of clothes, a book she had been meaning to finish for 6 months, and her collapsible cleaning kit, because 15 years of contract. Work had made her incapable of going anywhere without it. She stepped through the transit portal into a hall the size of a stadium. 17 thrones sat in a crescent ahead of her. Each throne held something that was not human. Tall gray figures with no visible ears. A wide, low creature that seemed to be made entirely of folded plates. Something luminous that pulsed slowly in a glass chair. And more, all watching her with expressions she could not fully read, but which shared a common quality. Disappointment. A 6-limbed creature in a very tight uniform rushed toward her. Its voice came out already mid-apology. There has been an error. A significant error. The summoning was intended for, that is to say, we required, the protocol clearly specified. Is there a lost and found? Nora asked. I think I took the wrong shuttle. The 6-limbed creature stopped. I am Protocol Officer Breen. And you are? It checked something on a flat screen it was holding. Nora Wade. Human. Occupation, contract cleaning services, mid-orbit station Revol 3. That's me, Nora said. From the largest throne, a tall gray figure rose. This one wore a long robe that brushed the floor and an expression like a man who has just opened a very important package and found it full of someone else's laundry. I am High Arbiter Soval, he said. This summoning was intended to call forth a human champion, a warrior, a leader of soldiers. Instead, he paused in a way that managed to be both polite and devastating. This arrived. I can't hear you, Nora said pleasantly. Breen leaned toward her and lowered his voice to a loud whisper. We will return you to your point of origin immediately. The portal can be reopened. He checked his screen, then checked it again. His 6 limbs went very still. The summoning protocol, said a calm voice from the far end of the crescent, binds whoever crosses the threshold. It cannot be reversed. This came from a figure who had not spoken yet, thinner than Soval, with dark markings along her jaw, watching Nora with something that looked almost like interest. Nora Wade is, by conclave law, the registered human representative, until the summoning purpose is fulfilled. Ambassador Dara, Breen said weakly. Surely there is a procedural exception. There is not, Dara said. I checked 3 times before she arrived. Nora looked at Breen. So I can't leave. Not at present, he admitted. No. She took this in. Then she bent down, unzipped her travel bag, and pulled out her collapsible cleaning kit. Breen stared at it. Soval stared at it. The luminous creature in the glass chair pulsed once, which may have meant anything. Then, Nora said, straightening, someone is going to have to explain what is going on from the beginning. While I look around, what followed was the most uncomfortable briefing the conclave had ever delivered. Breen spoke in a rapid, anxious voice about the Devourer Collective, a machine-organic civilization that had been, for the past 2 years, systematically disabling the defensive grids of conclave worlds. Not attacking directly, just disabling, and then sending polite messages demanding territory. Every attempt at negotiation had failed. Every military response had been countered before it launched. 17 civilizations, pooling their best minds, had found nothing that worked. The old conclave records mentioned a single historical precedent in which a human had resolved a crisis that all other species had failed to crack. The summoning was based on that precedent. They had expected someone impressive. While Breen talked, Nora moved slowly around the edge of the hall, looking at things. She ran a finger along a console ridge and examined what came away. On her fingertip, she looked at the ventilation grates. She looked at the light panels, 2 of which were flickering slightly in a way that suggested they had been flickering for a while and nobody had replaced them. Soval watched this with increasing unease. What exactly are you doing? Getting a feel for the place, Nora said. This is the grand reception hall of the conclave spire. I can tell. The floors are good. The maintenance on the secondary systems is not. She paused at a doorway on the left side of the hall. What is through here? Breen checked his screen. The former diplomatic negotiation chamber. It has not been used since the collective talks collapsed 14 months ago. I'd like to see it. Soval made a sound that was clearly the Drevithi equivalent of Y. But Ambassador Dara was already moving to open the door. The room inside was empty and dim. A long table sat in the middle, surrounded by chairs that had not been moved in over a year. Dust had settled on everything. In the particular, even way that dust settles on things that people have given up on. Nora walked to the center of the room. She did not say anything for a moment. She breathed in slowly, the way a person does when they are reading a room, the way other people read books. This room smells like fear, she said. Not the collective's. Yours. She looked at Dara. No wonder nothing worked. Soval, from the doorway, drew himself up. We have brought you here for a purpose. The collective has issued a final ultimatum. We require a plan. Nora turned to face him. She reached into her kit, pulled out a soft polishing cloth, and wiped down the nearest console. First, she said, I'm going to clean this room up. Then I'm going to think. You should try both sometime. Nobody spoke. The flickering light in the hall behind them buzzed once, then steadied, then buzzed again. Nora found the step stool in her kit, set it beneath the bad light panel, and climbed up to take a look. Nobody gave Nora a bedroom. They gave her a storage room that had been cleared. Of half its shelves, a folding cot that was 3 inches too short for a human, and a data pad loaded with files that Breen described as everything the Conclave knows about the Devourer Collective. He said it the way someone hands over a collapsed building and calls it a renovation project. She read for 6 hours. By the second hour, Callow had arrived. He was young for a Drevithi. The gray of his skin was still light, almost silver, and he had been assigned to her as an intelligence aide, which she suspected was the Conclave's polite way of making sure someone watched her at all times. He sat in the corner with his own pad and said nothing, which she respected. He occasionally looked up when she turned a page with more force than necessary. You are reading the maintenance logs, he said finally. It was not a question. It was the tone of someone watching a person eat a shoe and trying to stay calm. Yes, Nora said. The battle assessments are in the blue folder. The strategic projections. I read those first, she said. They told me what everyone already knows. The logs are telling me something else. Callow set his pad down. They are maintenance logs. Repair requests. Filing records. Right. She turned another page. Sit down closer. I'll show you. He moved his chair over with the caution of someone who suspects they are about to be proven wrong about something important and has not yet decided how they feel about that. Nora spread 3 logs across the table. She pointed to a grid sector. Designation, Artist 9's Outer Defense Ring. This grid failed 16 months ago. What does the battle report say? Callow pulled up the report. Collective interference. Signal disruption. The grid simply went offline. Now look at this. She slid the maintenance log across. 14 months. Before it failed, a level 3 technician filed a repair request on the primary relay coupling. What happened to it? Callow read. It was redirected to a secondary review committee. And then reassigned. And then, he stopped. Filed under a different reference number, Nora said. Which put it in a different queue, which nobody checked. The repair was never done. She pulled up a second log, then a third, then 4 more. Every single grid that failed in the past 2 years had open maintenance requests. Not one of them was ever actioned. The paperwork was just slightly, carefully, quietly wrong. Wrong committee, wrong reference number, wrong queue. The room was very still. Someone inside the conclave was doing this, Callow said slowly. Someone inside the conclave was making sure the right people never got the right forms, Nora said. The collective did not break the grids. They just made sure nobody fixed them. She leaned back. I've seen this before. Not with defense grids. With water recyclers. With pressure seals. You let the paperwork drift just enough, and the system dies on its own. Nobody is ever technically responsible. The thing just fails. Callow stared at the logs for a long moment. His silver-gray skin had gone a shade lighter. This means the collective has had agents inside our administration for years. At least 4. I'd guess more like 7 or 8, based on the spread of the affected sectors. She closed the logs. You need to pull the personnel records. For every committee those requests pass through. Cross-reference arrival. Dates with collective border activity. You'll find the pattern. He was already reaching for his communications link. Quietly, Nora said. Do it quietly. If they know we found it, the remaining agents go dark and we lose the trail. He stopped, looked at her, nodded once, and moved more slowly. It was while Callow was compiling the cross-reference that the transmission came in. It appeared on every screen on the station simultaneously, a face that was smooth and silver and symmetrical in a way that no organic face ever quite managed. The collective's herald. Its voice was pleasant and unhurried. It said that the Conclave had 72 hours to surrender 7 core worlds. If they did not, the remaining operational defense grids would be allowed to lapse. It said this the way a landlord explains a lease clause, regretfully, inevitably, as though the outcome were simply a matter of paperwork. The Conclave's War Council convened within the hour. Nora stood at the back of the room and listened to generals describe troop movements and assault vectors. The plans were detailed and confident and, she thought, completely beside the point. When there was a pause, she raised her hand. 7 sets of alien eyes turned toward her with expressions ranging from impatience to irritation. If you launch an offensive right now, she said, who is fixing the grids? While you're gone. Silence. You'll pull your technical crews to support the fleet. The remaining grids will be running on skeleton maintenance. All the collective has to do is sit back and let the paperwork pile up, same as before. You'll come home to a defense network that has eaten itself. One of the generals, a broad, plate-covered figure she had not yet learned the name of, said, "What do you suggest instead, human?" Nora walked to the observation window. Outside, the disabled outer ring of Artist 9's defense grid was visible, a curve of dark, dead metal against the stars, perfectly intact and entirely useless. The collective had not needed to fire a single weapon to put it there. She looked at it for a long time. I think, she said at last, that they are not conquerors. Conquerors want territory. These ones want the territory to already be broken before they arrive. She turned around. That is the behavior of something that is afraid to fight for real. And I want to know why. Nobody had an answer. But Callow, at the back of the room, was looking at her the way people look at a locked door when someone has just produced a key from an unexpected pocket. The War Council said no. Then Sovil said no. Then Breen read out 4 separate conclave regulations that collectively added up to a very long way of saying no. Nora listened to all of it, sitting at the end of the table with her hands flat on the surface, and when they had finished she said, I am, by your own law, the registered human representative. The summoning protocol gives me authority to act on the conclave's behalf in matters related to the summoning purpose. Is that correct? A pause. Breen checked his pad. His face did something complicated. Technically, he said, yes. Then I am requesting a direct transmission channel to the collective primary. Not the herald. The primary itself. Tell them the human representative is asking to speak. They'll be curious enough to accept. Sovil looked at her for a long moment. If this fails, you still have your assault plan, Nora said. Nothing I do in that room makes your situation worse than it already is. She picked up her travel bag, opened the channel. The neutral transmission chamber was a small, cold room with white walls and a single curved desk, designed so that neither party could claim an environmental advantage. It was the most featureless room Nora had ever been in, which was remarkable given how many utility closets she had worked in. She sat down. She put her bag on the desk. The screen at the far end of the room lit up. What appeared was not the smooth silver face of the herald. This was something older. The face on the screen had depth, layers of structure visible beneath a translucent surface, a pattern of moving parts that worked the way a clock works, all function and no pretense. The collective primary said nothing at first. It simply looked at her the way very old things look at things they have not seen before. Then it began. The standard sequence, the herald had called it, and she understood why. It had a rhythm, a catalog of collective military assets, delivered in precise numerical terms, followed by a projection of conclave Defensive collapse over the next 6 months shown as a simple descending graph, followed by the list of surrender terms, each one read out in the same unhurried, pleasant tone. It was not a threat. It was a presentation. The collective had given this presentation many times. Nora let it finish. Then she reached into her bag and took out a soft cloth and a small bottle of surface solution. She set them on the desk, uncapped the bottle, dampened the cloth, and began cleaning the curved surface of the transmission terminal. In front of her, the collective primary stopped. Not paused. Stopped. As though a process had encountered an input it had no. Category 4. Nora continued cleaning. The terminal had a thin film of dust along its lower edge and a faint smear on the upper right panel that had probably been there for months. "You are cleaning," the collective primary said. Its voice was different from the herald's, slower, more considered, each word placed with care. "The room was dusty," Nora said. "We are in the middle of a formal transmission. I know. I can do 2 things at once." She moved the cloth in slow circles. "I read your maintenance logs too, you know? Not just ours." Another stop. Longer this time. "Those files are not accessible to the conclave. They are if you know which deferred repair requests to follow. Your border station at Sector 12 Orin has been running its coolant exchange system on a manual workaround for 8 months. That is not the behavior of a civilization. That is winning comfortably." She set the cloth down and looked directly at the screen. "I also read your origin files. The ones in the deep archive on conclave record storage. The ones about what you were before you were this." The moving parts behind the primary's face shifted. It was a small movement, but it was not nothing. "I know about the war," Nora said. Her voice was even and not unkind. "The one that ended your organic civilization 300 years ago. I know what it cost you to survive it. I know that integrating the machine bodies was the only option you had, and I know that the expansion programming was written in the first decade afterward, when your people were still in pure survival mode." She folded the cloth neatly. "I know that nobody since then has ever turned it off, because nobody could agree on whether it was safe to stop." The collective primary was very still. "You've been expanding for 300 years, Nora continued. "Not because you want more territory. Because your foundational code says that if you stop, you collapse. You've been running from a war that ended before anyone alive today was built." She looked at the primary steadily. "That is not a military strategy. That is 3 centuries of unprocessed fear. And I want to ask you something that I don't think anyone has ever asked you." She waited. The primary did not speak, but it did not close the channel either. "Why haven't you asked for help fixing it?" The transmission chamber was very quiet. The white walls reflected the glow of the screen. Outside, through the door, Nora could hear the distant murmur of the conclave's war council still arguing about assault vectors. The primary spoke, finally. "No one has offered." "I know," Nora said. "That was a failure on everyone's part, including yours." She reached forward and closed the channel herself. The screen went dark. She capped the bottle of surface solution, folded the cloth, and put them back in her bag. She sat in the quiet room for a moment. Then she stood, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. Callow was outside, eyes wide. "What happened?" "The War Council wants to know." "I found the crack," Nora said, walking past him at a steady pace. "Now I need to figure out what's holding the rest of the wall up." Callow had the personnel cross-reference ready by the following morning. It was, as Nora had predicted, a clean pattern once you knew what to look for. 8 individuals, spread across 6 different administrative departments. 3 different species, none of them with any obvious connection to each other, had each been responsible for rerouting maintenance requests into dead queues. The earliest of them had been in post for 9 years. 9 years. The collective had been patient in ways that were almost hard to comprehend. Nora and Callow sat with Ambassador Dara in a small side office and went through the list one name at a time. There were no dramatic confrontations. Dara made 7 calls over the course of the morning. By midday, all 8 individuals had been placed on administrative reassignment pending review, moved sideways into roles with no access to maintenance routing systems, the change processed under a routine restructuring order. The paperwork was correct. The reference numbers matched. It would look to anyone watching, like a standard audit outcome. The collective will notice, Callow said. Their agents will stop reporting. They already know we're onto them, Nora said. The moment I closed that channel, the primary knew what I had found. What matters is that the routes are blocked before they can use them again. She looked at the list. Now, I need the deep archive access. The historical files on the collective's origin. Dara arranged it. The archive was a cold, narrow room 3 levels below the main conclave floor, its walls lined with storage units that hummed at a frequency just below hearing. A conclave archivist brought Nora 2 physical data cartridges and left without asking any questions, which told Nora that Dara had spoken to her before she arrived. The files confirmed what she had found in fragments before. 311 years ago, the species that would become the collective had fought a war of extinction against a neighboring civilization. They had nearly lost. In the final years, with their population reduced to less than a third of its original size and their planetary infrastructure collapsing, the surviving scientists had developed machine-body integration, a way to preserve consciousness, without biological support systems that were too expensive to maintain. It had worked. They had survived. But the programming written in those final desperate years carried the full weight of that desperation. Expand or collapse. Grow or die. The logic was not cruel. It was just terrified. It had been written by people who had watched everything they knew disappear and were trying to make sure it never happened again. 3 centuries later, the fear was still running. The people who had written it were long gone. No one had ever found a way to turn it off, because no one in the collective had ever reached a position of sufficient stability to pause the expansion long enough to try. Every time they slowed, the old code screamed. So they kept moving, kept reaching, kept quietly dismantling the defenses of neighbors who did not know they were already being consumed. Nora put the cartridges down and sat in the humming quiet for a while. By the time she came back upstairs, the War Council had finished its final assault plan. The lead general, the wide, plate-covered figure she now knew, was called Reth, presented it with the confidence of someone who had been building toward this moment for months. It was, she admitted to herself, a genuinely good plan. Coordinated, layered. It would hit the collectives outer systems simultaneously from 4 directions and prevent any single point of reinforcement. It would also kill a very large number of beings who had never chosen their own programming and had no way to change it. How many of the collective's population are fully integrated? She asked. When Reth finished. Approximately 94%, Callow said quietly from behind her. And if you destroy their core system infrastructure in an offensive, they cannot survive without it, Doris said. She had been standing by the window through the whole presentation. She had not looked at the battle maps. Their biology is dependent on the machine systems now. It has been 4 generations. To destroy the infrastructure is to kill them, Nora said. All of them. Because 300 years ago, someone wrote code that said keep moving or die, and nobody has ever been safe enough to fix it. The room was uncomfortable in the way rooms get when the truth arrives before anyone was ready to receive it. Soval, from his place at the head of the table, looked at Nora with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not dismissal, not impatience. Something more uncertain than either. You have a suggestion? It was not quite a question. Nora reached up and untied the apron she had been wearing. She had put it on 2 days ago without thinking, and it had simply stayed, and folded it with clean, precise movements. She set it on the table in front of her. I am not the representative anymore, she said. I need to be the negotiator. There is a difference. She looked at Soval directly. The representative shows up because the law says she has to. The negotiator shows up because she has decided what is worth fixing. She smoothed the folded apron once with the flat of her hand. I want a second meeting with the primary. Just me. No counsel in the room. No honor guard outside the door. A table, 2 chairs, and enough time. Nora and Callow worked through the night. Not on strategy documents. Not on battle contingencies. On a contract. A real one, with sections and subclauses and a clear definitions page, because Nora had learned early in her career that any agreement worth keeping needed to say exactly what each side was responsible for in language that left no room for a filing error to make it disappear. Callow knew conclave legal formatting. Nora knew how maintenance agreements worked in practice. They made, she thought, a reasonably effective team. By the time the third hour had passed, Callow had stopped questioning why she insisted on including specific timelines and escalation procedures and had started suggesting language she hadn't thought of. By the fifth hour, he had stopped looking at her as though she might be slightly unwell and had started looking at her the way people look at a process that turns out to be more rigorous than they expected. When they finished, Nora printed 2 physical copies on the station's document. Fabricator. She folded hers and put it in the front pocket of her bag. The second meeting was scheduled for mid-morning. Nora walked into the transmission chamber alone. 2 chairs this time, as she had asked, placed on either side of the desk. She sat in one. She put her bag on the floor. She waited. The screen lit up. The collective primary looked, if anything, more present than it had before. The layered structure behind its face was moving in a different pattern. Faster, more attentive. It had been thinking since the last transmission. She had expected that. You closed the channel, it said. I had found what I needed, Nora said. I didn't see the point in keeping you waiting. Most negotiators use that time to demonstrate leverage. I'm not most negotiators. She reached into her bag and placed the folded contract on the desk. I also removed the 8 agents your organization had in the Conclave's maintenance routing system. They have been reassigned to positions without access. The routes they used are closed. She said this without heat. I want you to know that I know, and I want you to know that I am still sitting in this chair. The primary was quiet for a moment. You are not angry. I'm practical, Nora said. Being angry at a fire for burning things doesn't help you put it out. She slid the contract across the desk toward the screen. I want to read this to you. I'd like you to listen without interrupting until I finish. Then we can discuss. She read. Her voice was steady and unhurried, the same tone she used when explaining a maintenance procedure to a new hire, clear, specific, no wasted words. The contract had 3 parts. The first part, the collective would immediately halt all interference with Conclave maintenance routing systems and any current agents in Conclave. Infrastructure would be recalled within 30 days. The second part, the Conclave would send a joint engineering team, including human engineers, specifically requested because Nora had written that clause herself, to work with collective technicians on the core system degradation problem at Sector 12 Orin. The team would operate under a shared information protocol with full access to the relevant system data. The third part, 3 collective border systems would be open to Conclave. Observation, not occupation, not control, just observation, for a period of 90 days. A review at the end of that period would determine next steps. She folded the document when she finished and set it flat on the desk. The primary said, after a pause, You are offering us engineers. I'm offering you people who are very good at keeping broken things running. Nora said, Yes. In exchange for withdrawal. Partial withdrawal. Reviewed in 90 days. Another pause. The moving parts behind the primary's face cycled through several patterns. Your kind has offered nothing in the past. No other species has offered anything except terms of surrender or declarations of war. I know, Nora said. That was a failure. On everyone's part. She met the screen steadily. You have been running expansion programming for 300 years because nobody has ever been stable enough or safe enough or trusted enough to help you find a different option. I understand why. I also know that it is going to eventually destroy you whether the Conclave fights back or not. Your core systems are degrading. 12 Orin is not the only one. The primary did not deny it. So, Nora said, what do you gain from the contract? You gain time. Real time. Not borrowed time. Time to actually look at the code your founders wrote in the middle of a catastrophe and decide, properly, what you want to do with it. That is worth more than 7 Conclave worlds. A long silence. And what does the Conclave gain? The primary asked. Nora said, a neighbor that isn't desperate. Desperate neighbors are expensive. The primary looked at her. The clocks behind its face turned in slow, steady rotation. Your species. You have been desperate. You have been afraid. You have had civilizations that nearly did not survive. It was not a question. It knew human history. How did you learn to build instead of consume? Nora thought about this honestly. She thought about the station she had grown up on, which had kept breaking and had been kept running by people who showed up every shift whether anyone thanked them or not. She thought about systems held together with the right part ordered 2 months late and the wrong part making do in the meantime. She thought about maintenance logs that nobody read except the people who cared. We didn't learn it all at once, she said. We just kept showing up and fixing things, even things that weren't ours, mostly because nobody else was going to. The primary was quiet for the length of a long breath. Conditional ceasefire, it said. 90-day review. We will send a technical liaison to Sector 12 Orin within 14 days. I'll have the engineering team ready in 10, Nora said. She stood, picked up her bag, and walked out of the transmission chamber. The War Council was waiting. Soval, Reth, Breen with his pad. All of them, in a row, watching the door. Nora held up the contract. It's a work order, she said. The most important document in any system is the one that says what needs doing and who is responsible for doing it. The formal acknowledgement took 3 days to prepare because Breen insisted on getting the wording right, and for once Nora found she did not mind. Good. Paperwork took as long as it took. The ceremony was held in the grand reception hall where she had first arrived. The same crescent of thrones, the same obsidian floors she had quietly noted, needed a proper reseal on the grouting along the east wall. Soval stood at the center dais and read from a prepared statement in a voice that managed, with clear effort, to sound sincere. It said that Nora Wade, human representative, had achieved through unconventional methods what the combined strategic resources of the Conclave had not achieved in 2 years. It said the Conclave was grateful. It said the Conclave wished to offer, in recognition, a permanent diplomatic title, representative at large, a seat on the advisory council, offices on Artist 9, staff, salary, and a uniform. Nora let him finish. I appreciate it, she said. I'll take the contract instead. Soval blinked. It was the first time she had seen him blink. I beg your pardon. She handed Breen a folded document. He opened it. His expression went through several stages before settling somewhere between astonishment and professional respect. It was an advisory services agreement. Terms of engagement for consulting on systems maintenance and institutional dysfunction to be rendered as needed. Standard notice periods. Clear deliverables. A daily rate that was. She had checked, fair by interstellar standards, but not small. You negotiated your own contract, Breen said. I did the draft last night, Nora said. Callow reviewed it. The legal language is solid. She looked at Breen. I'll need your signature on the admin page. Breen signed. His hand was slightly unsteady. Reth, the lead general, had watched the entire exchange from his throne with an expression she could not entirely read. As the ceremony broke up, he came to stand near her, not aggressively, just present, in the way very large creatures sometimes stand when they have something to say and are not sure how to begin. You could have had more, he said. Power, a title, influence. I have a consulting contract with favorable terms, Nora said. I can do more with that than with a title. He considered this. Then, slowly, he nodded once, which she suspected was considerable approval from someone who mostly communicated in battle plans. Ambassador Dara walked with her to the shuttle dock. The station corridors were quieter now. The War Council had dispersed. The Honor Guard had stood down. Artist 9 had the particular stillness of a place that has been braced for impact and is slowly working out that it does not need to be anymore. What will you do now? Dara asked. Go home, Nora said. There is a filtration unit on level 7 of my station that has been misreporting pressure data for 3 months. I left a note for the on-shift engineer, but I want to check it myself. Dara was quiet for a moment. Does it feel small? After all of this? Nora thought about it honestly. She thought about the way a defense grid looked from the outside, vast, dark, the product of enormous resources and enormous decisions. She thought about the maintenance request filed by a Level 3 technician 14 months before the grid failed. One form, rerouted into a dead queue, and everything that followed from that single point of neglect. Nothing that keeps people breathing is small, she said. Dara stopped at the shuttle dock entrance. She put one hand briefly on Nora's arm, a Drevathy gesture that Nora had learned meant something. Between thank you and I will remember this. Then she stepped back. Nora boarded the shuttle. She chose a window seat out of habit, stowed her bag under the seat in front, and pulled out the crossword puzzle she had. Started on the inbound journey and never finished. She found her pen at the bottom of the bag, clicked it twice, and settled in. 3 rows back, a pair of Yelesi travelers were arguing quietly about the fastest route to their destination. The shuttle's climate system made a faint, uneven sound on every third cycle, suggesting a filter that needed attention. The seat beside Nora was empty. Outside the window, the station turned slowly. In the dark, she filled in 7 across, which she had been stuck on since she left Revol 3. The answer was infrastructure. The shuttle cleared the dock. Artist 9 shrank behind the window. And then, as the outer edge of the station passed from view, the dead outer ring of the defense grid flickered. It did not go dark. It held, a slow, strong pulse of light along the arc of the ring, each node coming online in sequence, the way lights come on in a building when someone walks the corridor and finds the switches. Someone on the station, following a carefully and precisely written set of instructions that Nora had left in. The maintenance log 3 days ago had filed the correct forms, routed them to the correct team, and done the work. The grid powered up to full strength for the first time in 16 months. Nora did not see it. She was working on 8 down. Back on the observation deck of Artist 9, Kalos stood watching the shuttle shrink to a point of light. Behind him, the glow of the restored grid reflected off the deck windows. He had been standing there for a while, not entirely sure what he was trying to work out. Dara came to stand beside him. We asked for a hero, Kalos said. He did not say it as a complaint. More, as a person who is revising a long-held understanding of what a word means. Dara watched the point of light until it was gone. We got something more useful, she said. We got someone who knows how to fix things. The grid held steady. The stars were very bright. And somewhere in the lower maintenance corridor of Artist 9, someone had just found a correctly filed repair request waiting in their queue, reference number clean, committee. Designation accurate, priority level exactly right, and was already pulling on their work gloves.